Sam is the founder and executive director of Design Museum Everywhere, an online nomadic museum with the mission to bring the transformative power of design everywhere. Really relates back to what we were talking about in our last talk. Design is everywhere, so the museum has no permanent address. Instead, Sam and his team turn the museum inside out, making it accessible to all across many platforms and locations. Sam is also the host of Design is Everywhere, a weekly podcast on the impact of design in our lives. In 2008, Sam received the Red Dot Design Award for his design work at Bose, and that same year, the Bose Design Center received Red Dot's prestigious Design Team of the Year award. In 2019, he was named one of Fatherly's 100 coolest dads in America.
Yes.
I'd like to see the plaque for that, actually. And in 2020, Graphic Design USA named him one of the 20 responsible designers to watch. Sam frequently speaks at events and conferences, much like this one, on design, strategy, entrepreneurship, and museums, including his most recently at the New England Museum Association, MIT, TEDx, and various corporate gatherings. Sam, if you would please come on up to the stage, and I'll back out and let Angela take it over from here.
Thanks, Sean.
First, just real quick, Farrell and Sarah and Sean love that discussion about sustainability. I mean, what a more timely topic. I mean, I think so many people post-pandemic, our value systems have changed, and so many people are, so keenly aware of that. And Sam, I didn't even think about it, but I've completely forgot when I asked that question that Design Museum Everywhere is another organization where people can come together and talk about that, leading that charge, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, sustainability is one of our 12 impact areas.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that conversation.
I just really want to quickly just tell everyone, being a part of IDSA for many years, and not just being a member, but being an active participant. I remember years ago, I have to call this out, where I met you and you won an IDA, a Student Merit Award.
Yep.
And I remember seeing you then and realizing just in the beginning of your career, this was someone amazing to watch. And here you
knew back then I was going to get the coolest dad award later in life.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and, I know you have I think you have some slides, right?
Oh yeah, I got slides. Hopefully I'm sharing my screen. Hope everyone can see.
Yep.
Yeah, so why don't I dive in?
Yeah.
Love it. And I'll just say, like, right out of the gate, thanks for having me. I love this topic of change. What's the saying is like, there's only two constants in life, death and taxes. And it's like, that's one way to say it. I like to think about change being the main constant and just like loving change. So Metamorphosis like made so much sense to me for a topic and a theme. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Brave and Rita and everyone who's on. Other thing I'll just say before I really dive in is I love questions. Like I thrive on them. And I always think like you came to this event and this is your time to ask. So please like note your questions throughout. And then at the end, we can just chat. It's like, I much prefer that, but hopefully I'll tell you a little about me, a little about the Design Museum and some of the pivots we've made and how we have, as the title shows, adapted and evolved and sort of hope to demystify some of that. So that's me, Sam. Thanks for the intro. My background is industrial design. I worked at Bose, as Sean mentioned, for many years, designing products, various, look at this, it's right on my table. These speakers, there they are. Proud Papa. Love industrial design so much. I started teaching design. I taught at a few local universities here in the Boston area. And then started Design Museum Everywhere. Actually, I started this organization as Design Museum Boston, but we'll get to that in a little bit. A little bit about Design Museum Everywhere. Our mission is to bring the transformative power of design everywhere. This is going to be preaching to the choir for this group at the Design Summit, but we're all about inspiring people of what's possible with design, educating them to be creative problem solvers, and actually using design to transform communities, work, you name it. And so we do all kinds of museum-y things. Like if you have been to a science museum, then imagine that, but for design, right? So it's a place where, like a science museum, you don't have to be a scientist to go. design museum everywhere. You don't have to be a designer to attend and learn. But of course, we love designers too. We don't turn the designers away. Everything we do stems from this notion that design can change the world. We really believe that. I'm sure there are people on this call who are been designers for 20 years and they're jaded. They've been in the trenches and they don't believe this anymore, but we do. And it's the core of everything that we do, right? Everything is designed. Design can make us healthier, happier, more productive, connected. That is at the core of Design Museum. We cover all different types of design, from arts and apparel to technology, graphics, objects, you name it. A lot of what we do is showing the behind the scenes and creativity of what people see every day, right? Every day they see buildings, what goes into that, they see products. But probably over the last 5 years, what we've mostly been doing is showing how design can make an impact in these bigger conversations. So whether it's business or equity or education, sustainability, like the previous talk, these are some of the big questions we're trying to apply design to. And as I mentioned at the top, we have these 12 impact areas where everything we do connects to something on this list. And a lot of times what we'll do is connect multiple, right? Talk about sustainability in education or talk about entrepreneurship and diversity. So everything, whether it's a magazine article or an exhibition, touches this. I thought I'd show you a little bit about the work that we do, and that's happening now. We have an exhibition on view about prosthetic design. It's called Bespoke Bodies, the design and craft of prosthetics. So that actually is going to be our first exhibition back in the real world. We're doing it at the University of Hartford, starting at the end of August. So you'll be able to actually go to one of our exhibitions again, which I'm very excited about. And then we have an exhibit called We Design, People, Practice, and Progress, which highlights women, gender expansive, people of color, working in design across many different fields. So you get this kind of what's possible from a career standpoint in design, while also seeing all these amazing people from different backgrounds and perspectives that work in these careers. So I love We Design. It's a great exhibition. This will be back on view. It's in storage now through the pandemic. It'll be back on view at Montserrat College of Art in September. We do a ton of events, and pre-COVID did tons of events in person. Of course, we'll talk about the pivots later. We have a quarterly magazine that we love. Latest issue is called The Policing Issue, which explores the intersection between design and policing. Really important topic. Hopefully everyone gets a chance to check it out. And we do books. We do also publish books. This is a book about bespoke bodies, the exhibition. And last thing I'll mention, we do youth programming to teach design to namely teens is the area that we're focused. So do a lot at Design Museum, a lot of different things. I would say we're extremely adaptable and change a lot. And I think that has to do with how we started. So a bit of the origin story of Design Museum started in 2009 with my best friend. There we are, me and Derek rocking our orange bow ties. We have the classic, it's not a back of a napkin, but this is the back of the pizza box that Derek and I sketched our vision for what Design Museum could be. And I still have this pizza box somewhere. Someday I'm going to frame it. But my vision for Design Museum was this, right? I think if you think about museum, you think, there it is. And I was like, especially in Boston, which is like such like a museum brick and mortar town, Derek and I were like, we need to strive to have columns and we're going to be like a real museum. But of course, I don't know if anyone can remember 2009 at this point, but 2009 was not the best time to start a new nonprofit museum, right? Actually, 2009 looks amazing compared to 2020, but 2009 with the economic collapse and the Great Recession, not a great time to raise money or try to do this. And so this was our first big adaptation or pivot, if you will, which was basically shifting from working to be a single location museum, like pretty much every other museum. What we saw walking around Boston during the Great Recession was there's just a lot of spaces around that we could produce our exhibitions in. So instead of being a single location museum, we created a pop-up museum. So we consider ourselves nomadic. We don't have a home. We pop up in places like airports and schools. lobbies, we do stuff outside, you name it. And that was such a key moment of adapting and change. We could have quit. We could have been like, a lot of people said, like, you can't start a new museum right now. It's not going to happen. Our slogan at the time was that design is everywhere. And we were like, well, what if the museum was everywhere? And that was a huge entrepreneurial, creative, innovation by necessity moment that has then now led to us popping up in places all over the US. And, preview that also set us up to adapt to something like COVID when so many museums could not. So fast forward, that was 2009. Resuming, we've done exhibitions, events, great. 2020, here comes pivot number 2. 2020, also not a great year to be a museum when we have to basically put our exhibitions in storage and we can't do in-person events. My team and I, we were so adaptable and we turned basically on a dime. And I'll show you some of that stuff, but basically in early March, we started pivoting. We, in March, rebranded ourselves. So we had expanded to Portland, Oregon. So we had Design Museum Boston, Design Museum Portland, pivoted immediately almost to be Design Museum Everywhere, and created this overall program where we would be the museum that comes to you, right? And we did that in a number of ways, launched a new version of our website, launched a podcast, really doubled down on our magazine. We got into virtual events immediately. I mean, any events that we had planned for March, we turned into virtual instantly. And that's easy to say. We had to do a lot of now virtual events, like here we are on Zoom. It's so easy. Back then we were testing things and moving things around, and just my team worked so hard to basically create virtual events out of the gate, which allowed us to connect with presenters then all over the world, which was so fun. In April of 2020, we launched a podcast from scratch. None of us had ever created a podcast. We did it. Now it's one of the top 50 design podcasts in the US. Very proud of that. Go check it out. Subscribe. If you like my voice, you can hear it every week. We brought our exhibitions online. So I mentioned We Design. You can now see that exhibition on our website completely. All the content is on there. And we've heard from professors, teachers that it now is required reading for their students, which I love to hear. Went a step further, and we're just constantly innovating. How can we get our exhibition content to people, right? They can't come to our exhibitions. So a few months ago, we launched a card deck. So you can buy this card deck and you can actually have the exhibition at home, right? You can lay it out on your table, which is a lot of fun. We brought all our education programming online, so you could start downloading different lesson plans and do activities with your kids, whether you're a caregiver, a parent, a teacher. So those have been popular. Anyway, that huge pivot did it very quickly, in a matter of days, really, upon hearing about COVID and it happening. The results are beyond anything I could possibly imagine. Our brand awareness, you can imagine going from, folks in Boston and Portland to now being global, really. And so our membership numbers have been amazing. As it says here, we have members now across the US and in 20 countries. And as our board chair often says, he thinks that we're actually better off, we'll be better off post-COVID than we were going into COVID, because our brand awareness is higher, our supporter base is bigger. And that all comes down to being adaptable, embracing change. Not a lot of our cohort organizations, small and medium museums, sort of held their breath during COVID, and they're like, we'll just wait it out. Whereas we said, don't let a crisis go to waste, and how can we change? And that's why I love this topic. And I love when Angela reached out to sort of talk about how we pivoted in the past, and it allowed me to kind of reflect on how we were able to do that. So to me, this isn't rocket science, and hopefully it will help demystify some of this. And you could do all of this in your own business. Even if you're a sole proprietor, freelance designer, you can do this for yourself. You can do your own strategic planning, scenario planning, etc. So I'll just dive into these. I want to make sure we leave time for questions at the end, but prior to COVID happening, we had a strategic plan. And I think a lot of people think to be adaptable and resilient, you just got to be able to change and not have very set plans. think it's actually the opposite. We had a very set plan, a 5-year plan. You can see it was approved by the board about a year before COVID, really hit. This was my North Star during COVID and during like these moments when we had to decide like how are we going to change. And I'm proud that our priorities didn't change at all based on this huge global pandemic. So our strategic plan, I think, is only 12 pages. It doesn't have to be this like huge binder. We have the, as you can see, like the classic like mission, vision, what are we doing to our audiences? The main part of it, again, that I think anyone can do is sort of say, 5 years, what are our priorities? And as you can see, we developed 5 kind of programmatic priorities and 5 sort of like internal infrastructure priorities. And then we basically created these like 1-pagers that said, what is it? What are we going to do to really focus our efforts, right? It's one thing to say we want to focus on exhibitions and improving our exhibitions, or we want to build our capacity. But what does that mean? And I don't want to gloss over that there's a lot of sessions with the board and my staff to develop this. This doesn't just like happen, but it's doable. You can do it in your business. The sections here are very simple. It's like, what's the priority and what's the, quick description. We analyzed each priority on these sort of 2 dimensions, which is how do we stabilize, in this case, exhibitions, and how do we grow them? So that's sort of like drilling down a little bit into the actual priority. And then you could almost consider this bottom portion like an implementation plan more than just a strategic plan of like, what are we going to actually do? And what are we going to pay for? What are we going to invest in with our dollars? And you can see, since I've updated this, pretty much every 6 months, like little check marks of things we've done. And so you can see the near term of the 5 years and the long term of that. But again, this is all stuff that anyone can do. And I think it's extremely valuable when change happens that's outside your control. Again, I was able to go back to this and be like, okay, these are our priorities. I just have to change some things, right? I can't do exhibitions in person. I can't do events. Some things that were in the future, like doing more like audio and video content, I just brought them closer, right? I could push off physical exhibitions and do the media stuff now. So anyway, that's a strategic plan that we did. Again, I'm hoping to demystify some of this so that anyone can produce this for themselves and their team. I think it's so valuable to be able to adapt to change, to have, again, this like North Star. Looking good on time. Great. Another thing that I did, and I use this a lot, and it's a very simple way of thinking about scenario planning and thinking about the future, or thinking about any changes that can impact you. So first, I don't know if this is a concept that everyone uses, but design museum is complicated enough that I can't think about it as a whole. I have to bucket it into these different sections, right? And my strategy, I have strategies within each of these buckets. And these will be different for every business, but every business is going to have sales or client acquisition. You might have a bucket for like your actual service that you're providing, or the product, production, distribution. Come up with your bucket list, however it makes sense for you to think about your business and your operation. But this is how I bucket the design museum. And by the way, just an aside, I don't have a slide for this, but I, as a nonprofit, I have to have a board of directors, right? So people that I report to. So I report on these 8 buckets every quarter. Now you might be like, oh God, that's a lot of work. It's so clarifying to me to every quarter sit down and be like, what is happening with development and finance? Are we hitting our goals? You can do this as well. Even if you don't have a board, you could report to yourself, basically. And the way I do this is I used to have what I call an executive summary, which is basically just the document. And it has these sections and an update on where we are compared to our goals, what's going on, what big questions I have. Now I make a video every quarter because my board does not like to read. So I make a video just talking through each one of these buckets, and they love it. And I love it, and the team loves it. It gets us all very clear on what's going on. But back to scenario planning. I love and hate this document that I put together. You can see I made this document on March 16th, 2020, which just hopefully shows you how serious I take change and scenario planning, because I think I heard about the coronavirus and made this and presented it to the board. So let me go down here, but basically very simple. Again, you all can do this. This is not special. Is my buckets along the left column, scenarios across the top. The scenarios in this case were the length of the pandemic. So if the pandemic lasts 1 month, we'll do this. If it lasts 12 months, we'll do this. And I was so fun for me. Actually, I haven't looked at this in a couple months since the pandemic certainly is longer than 12, but this guided all the changes we made. Everything on here we either did or at least talked about. And I mean, talk about value in terms of being able to share this with your team and say, these are the milestones. Across the top could be any scenarios. Across the top could be, we enact this new client acquisition strategy, and here's what's going to happen. Or a scenario could be, we lose this big customer, what happens? But if you can kind of break it down to your buckets, to me, that's extremely valuable. Last thing I'll mention in the last 2 minutes here are just the importance of people. I mean, that is at the core of everything. And I'll say, we couldn't have made all these pivots and changed as a museum either time, either in 2009 or 2020, without incredible people. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Simon Wardley. He's a very interesting, quirky dude. A great Twitter follow if you are interested in this kind of stuff. His scenario planning makes my scenario planning look like it was drawn with like crayons. He has created this methodology called Wardley mapping. It's not part of my talk because it's more complicated than I want to get into, but you could see some of these Wardley maps that he produces. And I just think if you're not familiar with Simon, you should definitely check him out. But he does have this whole idea around people of pioneers, settlers, and town planners as like types of people in your business. I don't think we need another like colonizing metaphor. So I'm just going to rebrand these as dreamers, builders, and planners. But I will show you Simon's kind of breakdown here. Again, I don't think many of you probably already realize this, but the importance of having dreamers, of people who are gonna like take risks, try things, people who are so comfortable with uncertainty. I mean, this is me. I have no problem with uncertainty and like creating a vision, even though I maybe don't know how to build it. Builders being people who can actually take that vision, grow it, create a business around it, grow a market. You might think about people who can like prototype and then take that prototype, to the next level. And then planners being people who I find so valuable when I find a planner, people who can really scale something, who are system and metric driven and can take a vision and a prototype and actually turn it into something that can like operate. So why am I showing you this? Because I have resisted for 10 years hiring planners. Despite my board, despite everyone telling me that we need to operate more in that realm. You can think, another way to think about these buckets of people are like the different phases of water, maybe. It's like dreamers like being like a water vapor, can go anywhere, but it's not very useful. A builder being like water, where it's like the path of least resistance, but also useful. You can generate electricity from water. And then planners being like ice, being like rigid, but you can actually build stuff out of ice. And I've been reticent to create ice because it's harder to break ice and change it, right? It's harder to break this down, and having the flexibility of employing dreamers and builders has allowed us to be extremely flexible for 10 years. Now, right before COVID, and now, 12 years into this, we are now starting to hire more planner. We just hired our first ever director of operations, and we're building these systems. But I'll say the first, 8 to 10 years of Design Museum, where we're like figuring things out and how do you create a museum that's nomadic and survive, the malleability of having dreamers and builders has been huge. It also is some level of chaos. And I know some planners we may have hired in the past who were in this mode were not happy. So it's not clean. It's like, oh, 3 things, great. But I'll just say that having dreamers and builders is key. And now we're getting to that point in our business where we can actually adequately employ planners and have them actually process out our business. Okay, that's everything in terms of adaptability and some of the ways that I've made change. Check out the museum. Lots of ways to engage, whether it's our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social, subscribe to our magazine. Here, I've got a couple issues right here. I wish I could like throw them out to the audience. You get an issue, you get an issue. But anyway, with that, happy to answer any questions about anything. Design museum, adapting change, what it means to be a cool dad, whatever you have.
Sam, what an amazing presentation. Thank you for sharing how you've been adapting Design Museum, I mean, and as in that world of organizations, I mean, the way you've built Design Museum everywhere, it's so unconventional already and progressive. And just watching how you've been so, agile during this pandemic is fascinating.
Oh, thanks.
There, saw a couple questions or comments from Andrew Milno. And one of the comments he wrote was, "We design. How can the design industry encourage local design, e.g. training designers in, say, Uganda to design products and services for people in Uganda?" Kind of localism, right?
I love that. And yeah, we've tried to, every time we've done We Design, we have this collection of amazing individuals. We try to localize it based on the designers that are in the city that the exhibition has traveled to. That's a big question around like how to, get designers. What we've done, I guess I'll apply the approach we've taken with teens, is around mentorship, but mentorship that ends sort of like, our mentors don't tell the teens what to do. There's a lot of, I think, youth design programs that are like, hey, design something to combat homelessness. Like, that's something you all care about. It's like, actually, some teens might, but the teens in our program, they're into other stuff. And so what we've allowed in that regard is like, what are the challenges that they see in their lives and in their communities? And they drive the projects that we do. And then our mentors are there around them to help them with skill building, help them with process, but not to be like, you should design this, you should do that. And maybe it's a similar thing, in the developing world, a model that could potentially highlight the design that's happening there, and then create some mentorship models that allow people to, thrive and try design. More questions, keep them coming.
It's just so interesting how we can inspire local communities to build, their own organizations.
Totally.
Right? There's obviously during this pandemic, a breakdown and so much localization going on, right? The other point, and loved and by the way, your strategy planning. I mean, this is something that, in fact, any designer within a corporation, any kind of company, or with their clients, can run them through this.
Totally.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah, we try to make it as simple. I mean, everything, we're a design museum, so everything we do has to be designed. And we were like, we cannot end this process with like a 40 to 100 page, binder that no one looks at. It's like super simple. Like, I can hand this to a new board member and be like, here's what we're doing.
And it's so valuable because it's reminding him, for you to do this on a periodic basis, to understand what's the long-term goal, particularly with something like we've all moved through. How do we reevaluate what our goals are, what our objectives are, who's on the team? And on that point, love your designers, builders, planners org chart, because I think we're creatives, right? And we forget that we need the planner.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I don't. So like I said, pre-COVID, we were like getting to that. It was almost painful, and that was by my kind of design to keep us kind of in that flexible stage. But we were almost painfully missing planners, and now certainly we can be a little bit more strategic because we've had this like buffer of COVID to be like, okay, now is the time. But yeah, if you have a team of just dreamers, I mean, good luck.
Yes. Designers, you speak to your colleagues to, commiserate and inspire each other, but find your builders and your planners.
That's also, I will say, like, I think there are designers out there who are planners who feel
Yes.
pressure to be dreamers, and I want them to own their planningness. And when you're reaching out for jobs, to be like, listen, I want to come in, I'm a designer, but I'm going to help you process this whole thing,
Yes.
create metrics and use my expertise. I will tell you, as a dreamer and as a CEO, if someone wrote a cover letter like that to me, I'd be like, hire that person on the spot.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, and I've helped people move through those roles where people have moved through to product development and production and product management. In fact, Zoe's one that we've seen, one of many that we've helped understand the viability in that career track, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you come with a creative mindset.
Totally.
I love you've got some other questions here.
Yeah. They're in the chat. Cool.
Pedroso says, Sam, I would love some tips for designers that are also entrepreneurs, especially for social business owners, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's difficult having like a more socially, having that, whether it's triple bottom line or for entrepreneurs, my advice is multifactorial. One of my favorite words. Excuse me.
Multifactorial.
Love it. You need a co-founder for one, especially for a social enterprise. Doing it alone, even a for-profit business doing alone, I think is very difficult. A social enterprise, whether it's a nonprofit or a B Corp or something, there's more dimensions that multiply out, and you need a co-founder. And I would say, like, to young entrepreneurs, like, if you have a vision and you can't convince one person to join you on that journey, how are you going to convince 1,000 people to be in your community or to buy into what you're doing? Like, you convince one person to join you on that journey. And I'll keep going from there. Of, you have to build a community around you. I think that's absolutely essential. And that could take on many forms. Don't look at Design Museum has a community of thousands. Great.
Right.
But I would say our core community, and Angela's part of this, is our board and our council that like provides this level of support and idea bouncing. And I like to be so transparent because I get so many, this is like a humble brag, but I'm hoping to dismiss it because people are like, Sam, Design Museum is always making like great decisions and like moving in the right direction. And I'm like, I have like 60 people in my community, Angela's one of them, that I can be like, hey, we have this crazy idea, or we have this not so crazy idea, or we want to do this, we want to do that. And I get real-time feedback anytime. So as a nonprofit, I have to have a board, but any business can create an advisory committee or a mentorship committee and get that same support. So I could go on. I love entrepreneurship and I could talk about entrepreneurship all day, but those are two, I think, key pieces of advice. And
let me quickly just say that being part of organizations, being a member is one thing, to sit and receive value from an organization, but to be actively participating in it, you're affecting something larger than yourself. You're affecting, an organization that represents the industry. And it's been such gratifying experience to be able to help you in your community, as well as I've done for IDSA and DMI.
Totally.
And so for everyone, if you want to be part of and impact something larger than yourselves, I know that Sam is looking for council advisors.
Join our council. It's a great group. Love that group, and we're doing some really strategic stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in joining the council, you can either message me on Twitter, or I'm easy to find to contact us via our website.
Okay, I think we are running into the next one, but I just want to read real quick. Kelly Cook says, I love planners. Kelly, we love you because you're the planner. We love you. Grateful for planners. Yes. And in our company, we're looking for the planner because we are the dreamers and the builders, and we realize the planner. You need it.
Key. I've had a director of operations now for 90 days, and it's huge. She's amazing, and I don't know what I'd do without her at this point. So yeah.
Kim Clement had asked, what's your biggest obstacle in the everyday? Is it convincing someone that they need to give you display space? Is it getting people to come in and see your exhibit? Is it the finances? What's your everyday?
I think, for quickly, it comes down to being a very unique museum. And so what does that mean? Like, we had to kind of educate donors to support us because they're like, wait, what is this thing? Like they're already confused about design, which is why Design Museum needs to exist. But then they're like, you want me to support, you want me to give to that? And then, I think the other thing is, it's more of a challenge, or you can see it as an opportunity, is how do you create, we don't have a building that people can go to and it's like always there. So how do you create a constant thread for people? That's why like when I started a print magazine in like 2014, they were like, you're insane because every print magazine's going out of business. And I was like, it's different for us. I need some artifact that you can hold every day and be like, I'm part of this thing. Like it's actually physical. So creating that constant thread throughout and you can see why we do the podcast every week, because it's like a constant, like Design Museum is in your mind. Design Museum exists, between these 6 inches. And so it is a challenge. A regular traditional museum would be like, come see our permanent collection. It's there, whatever. And we are like on a treadmill, of getting content out.
You're in social. I mean, you're, virtual,
Yeah.
right? It's a combination of virtual and this is where the world's going. So you've been there while, it's interesting. Creating the constant, I love it. Kim noticed, creating the constant thread. Yes. Helen wants to know, are these templates available on the Design Museum website?
Not on our site, but just email me and I can hook you up.
Yep. And then his email's right there. And then also, guys, we are going to be sharing these recordings afterwards. And these will be some of the first podcast links that we'll be sharing as well. So you guys can share that there. Sam, just absolutely impressed with what you've done and how you've filled a void in our industry. I think and I love where Design Museum everywhere brings in all these different creative professions. Actually, I had a question earlier on for you, was what's your makeup of your audience, your membership? Are they all different types of creatives, or do you even have non-creatives?
Yeah,
who are, those that are fans?
Yeah. I'd say and I call them design enthusiasts. People who aren't designers but aren't going to go to an IDSA event, right? They just don't, or a DMI, and that's our sweet spot. But I'd say like that's probably about 40% of our like membership, and then the other 60% are designers and creative of all stripes: architects, interior, graphic, industrial, you name it.
I love that. I mean, this is a great community where you get design enthusiasts to be in the same room, right? Sometimes there's a benefit and a need for creatives to sit together and chat on getting real meta on the practices,
the industry,
the frameworks, or the challenges. But then this is a great community where you're connecting with those design enthusiasts, right?
I mean, that's my favorite analogy is the science, right? Like there's the National Science Foundation, there's groups for sciences where you're talking science and you're figuring shit out. And that's the importance of an IDSA, AIGA, AIA. But there's science museums where the general public and scientists can come together and learn about science in an accessible way. And no, that did not exist in design until, we started this. So I'm glad to be filling that gap. And excited to see where we go from here.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Building this. And thank you for your insights on how you've moved your own organization through this, talk about change, this pivot.